Hi, today we're going to talk about how to do dihybrid crosses using a Punnett square. And then at the end, I'm going to show you some shortcuts where you can check your work of dihybrid crosses without having to go through the whole process of using a Punnett square. Now, a dihybrid cross is going to look at how two genes are inherited from one generation to the other. Monohybrid crosses are looking only at one gene and how that one gene is inherited from generation to generation. And if you're looking for monohybrid crosses or more information about the basics of genetics, check out my other videos. The links are above. So today we're going to be look at how two separate traits are inherited. And in this case, we're going to be looking at pea plants. We're going to do just like Mendel did when he did his dihybrid cross. So we're going to be looking at pea plants, and the two traits are going to be the shape of the pea and the color of the pea. Now, pea shape can be round or it can be wrinkled, and the round gene is dominant over the wrinkled allele, okay? So big R is going to mean round, the round allele. Little r means the wrinkled allele. Now, as far as pea color goes, peas can be yellow or green. So yellow is the dominant allele. So we're going to use big Y to denote yellow, and we're going to use little y to denote the recessive green allele. Now, I know you're thinking, wait, green is actually recessive? We eat green peas. That's what we eat. And yeah, green is recessive. So the peas that we eat, they're homozygous recessive. They all have two recessive alleles, and that's why they're green. So we are going to do a cross, and this is the parent cross or the pea cross. We're going to cross plants that have both dominant phenotypes, okay, with plants that have both of the recessive phenotypes. So we're going to cross plants that have round yellow peas, because round and yellow are the dominant phenotypes, with a plant that has wrinkled green peas, because that's the recessive phenotype. Now we're going to start with homozygous plants. So our round yellow pea plants have two round alleles and two dominant yellow alleles. And our recessive plants are homozygous recessive, meaning they have two of the wrinkled pea-shaped alleles and two of the green alleles. So our first cross, the pea cross, is going to be to cross plants with round yellow peas with plants that have wrinkled green peas. So let's just look at the chromosomes, another way to represent this, okay? Peas, just like humans, are diploid. That means that they have two of each chromosome. So here is the first chromosome that we have represented here. And on both chromosomes, this particular gene, well, this parent plant has the dominant allele on both chromosomes. Now, the other gene is found on a different set of chromosomes. So here are the two chromosomes that that parent plant has with the dominant yellow allele on this other chromosome. Now, in contrast, if we look at the plant with the wrinkled green peas, it has the recessive wrinkled gene on both chromosomes, and on the other chromosome, it has the recessive green allele. Now, why this is important is because we have to know which alleles can be passed on to the next generation if we're going to use a Punnett square to figure out what that F1 generation could be. Okay, so our first step in doing a dihybrid cross like this and using a Punnett square is to determine the possible gametes of the parents. Now, we just looked at what the parents' genes look like, and this is one of dad's germ cells that's found in the testicles. And so remember, the germ cells are going to go through the process of meiosis to form the sperm in men, or the germ cells found in the ovaries of women are going to go through meiosis to form eggs in females. So here we have the two chromosomes, right, that have the genes on them. We have a pair of this chromosome and a pair of this chromosome. And as a reminder, during meiosis, those pairs get separated so that the sperm and egg only have one of each chromosome. Now that comes back together in the process of fertilization, that one set from dad, okay, the sperm fertilizes the egg or the ovum of the mother. And so now the offspring, the zygote, that fertilized egg, has 2 of each chromosome. One set came from dad's sperm, one set came from mom's eggs. And it's the same thing with pea plants. So when we're doing any sort of Punnett square, the first step is to figure out what the possible gametes that the parents can pass along are, what the alleles are going to be in those gametes. So the gametes of dad are the sperm, the gametes of mom are the eggs or ova. Okay, so let's look first at dad, and then we'll look at mom. Now we know that this is, for instance, the germ cell of dad, and the germ cell is going to go through meiosis to form sperm. And only one of the 2 of each chromosome is going to be found in the sperm. So we know that this chromosome could end up with this chromosome. So in one sperm, we could have big R and big Y. Now, this first chromosome could also be separated into a sperm with this second chromosome. Here, big Y, so that sperm would have big R, big Y. This chromosome here could end up in a sperm with this chromosome, and so that sperm would have big R, big Y. And finally, this chromosome here could end up in a sperm with this chromosome. And so we could end up with big R, big Y. So because our father plant here is homozygous dominant for both genes, that means that that's all that he can pass along. Big R and big Y, or big R and big Y, right? Now, I want you to notice when you look at the possible alleles here in the sperm that there's none of both of these chromosomes. There's no big R, or big Y in any of these chromosomes. Because remember, each pair gets separated. So when you're looking at the gametes, the sperm or the eggs that can result, there should never be 2 of the same gene in one of those. If you put big R and big R in as one possibility, that's not going to work because those 2 chromosomes don't normally go into the same sperm. They get separated. So keep that in mind, okay? There should only be 1 of each gene in the sperm or the eggs. Now, the same thing we can do with mom's eggs here. We know that this chromosome could end up with this chromosome. And so the first egg could have little r and little y. Now, this chromosome could end up in an egg with this chromosome. That's going to be little r, little y. This chromosome could end up in an egg with this chromosome, so little r, little y. And finally, this chromosome could end up with this chromosome in one of mom's eggs. That's little r, little y. So just like with dad, because dad started out homozygous dominant, well, mom starts out homozygous recessive. And that means that she's only going to pass along recessive alleles. Again, note that there's 1 of each in the eggs, okay? There needs to be 1 R allele and 1 Y allele, never 2 of the same allele. Okay, so now we've figured out with our cross, right? Here's dad's original genotype and mom's genotype. We figured out that dad's sperm can have big R, big Y, big R, big Y, big R, big Y, or big R, big Y. Those are how the 2 chromosomes could end up separating into the sperm. Now, in mom's eggs, we can have little r, little y, little r, little y, little r, little y, or little r, little y. That's how the alleles can be passed along in mom's eggs. So now we can do our Punnett square to figure out what the possible offspring will be. Now we're going to put the all possible alleles that we find in the father's sperm, we're going to put those on the left side here. And along the top, we're going to put the different allele versions that are found in the mother's eggs. Now there's 4 different possibilities we saw in the father's sperm and 4 in the mother's eggs. So we have 4 by 4, which means there are 16 different boxes here, 16 different possible outcomes for the zygotes or the fertilized eggs. So let's go ahead and put the father's possibilities over here. Now remember, he can only pass along big R and big Y because he is homozygous dominant for both genes. Now at the top, we'll put the possible alleles we can find in the mother's eggs. And because she is homozygous recessive, we know that those eggs are all going to have 1 recessive allele for the shape of the pea and 1 recessive allele for the color of the pea. So now we can just go through and say, if this sperm fertilizes this egg, what are we going to get? Well, we're going to get big R, big Y, little y. And you can put these however you want, but I like to keep the genes together, right? Because we had one chromosome in the sperm or the egg, and now when they come together, we have two of each. So I like to line them up chromosome by chromosome, gene by gene. So we have one big R, one little r, one big Y, one little y. Okay, so if this sperm fertilizes this egg, that's going to give us another possible outcome, and that's going to be big R, big Y, little y. Now here, if this sperm fertilizes this egg, big R, big Y, little y. And finally, if this sperm fertilizes this egg, we're going to get big R, big Y, little y. Okay, so you can see because the father's sperm all had the same possible alleles and the mother's eggs also had all the same possible alleles, the genotype of all four of these options is the same. They're all homozygous for both the R and Y genes. We can continue on and do this, right? If this possible sperm fertilizes this egg, we're going to get big R, big Y, little y. And because all of these sperm have the same allele combinations and all of these eggs have the same allele combinations, we know that all of the offspring are going to be big R, big Y, little y. So in the F1 generation, all of the offspring have a heterozygous genotype. And as far as the phenotype goes, well, what would that be? So we have big R, that stands for round. Little r is the wrinkled allele, and it's the recessive one. So the big R wins. So this individual is going to have round P's. And what color will the P's be? Well, big Y is yellow, and it's dominant over the recessive little y green allele. Because it's dominant, that means that the P's are going to be yellow because that's the dominant color here. So big R, big Y, little y, that means that that pea plant is going to have round yellow peas. So when we start with homozygous parents, one who's homozygous dominant and the other that's homozygous recessive for both of those genes, all of the F1 offspring are going to be heterozygous, and that means they're all going to show the dominant phenotype for both of those genes, and that's round and yellow peas. Now, though, let's go ahead and do an F1 cross. This is the F1 generation. These are our 16 possibilities, which all turn out to be the same. Let's take two of these offspring and cross them together, okay? So now we're going to do an F1 cross where we start with heterozygous individuals. One heterozygous male plant, one heterozygous female, and we're going to cross or breed them together. Now, again, the rules are the same. We determine the possible gametes of the parents first. We need to figure out the gametes, the sperm and the egg possibilities, so that we can fill them into our Punnett square. So here are the chromosomes found in dad's cells, and he's diploid, so there's two of each. On one chromosome, the gene is big R, and because he's heterozygous, on the other chromosome is the recessive little r. Now, the same scenario occurs on a different chromosome with big Y and little y. So now when we figure out what can possibly be the combinations in the sperm, well, when these pairs are separated into different sperm, we know that this chromosome could end up separating with this chromosome. And so one sperm could be big R, big Y. This chromosome could also possibly separate with this chromosome. So in that sperm, there would be big R, little y. Now, this chromosome could end up separating with this chromosome. So we would have little r, little y as the allele outcomes in that sperm. And finally, this chromosome could end up separating with this chromosome. So we would have little r, little y. These are the four allele possibilities for the father who starts out heterozygous for both of these genes, R and Y. Now, we could go through the same thing with the mother, but notice the mother has the same genotype as the father. They're both heterozygous. So when the mother's germ cells go through meiosis to form the eggs, she's going to end up with the same possible outcomes. Big R, big Y, big R, little r, big Y, and little r, little y. Now let's put those outcomes in our Punnett square. The father's possible alleles will go over here. Remember, we have a sperm that could have big R and big Y, big R, little r, big Y, and little r, little y. Now, the mother was heterozygous as well. So in her eggs, we can have big R, big Y as an outcome, big R, little y, little r, big Y, and little r, little y. Okay, so now we do the process of fertilization, where we say if this sperm fertilizes this egg, well, we're going to have big R, big Y, big Y, okay? Now, if this sperm fertilizes this egg, we're going to have big R, big Y, little y. This sperm fertilizes this egg, we're going to have big R, big Y, big Y. And if this sperm fertilizes this egg, we're going to have big R, big Y, little y. Now you can see when you start with heterozygous parents, the offspring have different genotypes as the different alleles are passed along to this next generation. And this is an F1 cross. The parents were the F1. They were the first generation. So the offspring are F2. Now let's do the same thing with this next sperm possibility. If this sperm fertilizes this egg, we can have big R, little y, big Y. And by the way, it doesn't matter which allele you put first. You can put the little y first or the big Y first. I always like to put the dominant allele first, so it's easier for me to keep track of. If there's a recessive allele, it's going to be the second one. But you can do it however you like, as long as in these offspring, these fertilized eggs, there's 2 of each gene, okay? Now, this sperm fertilizes this egg. We get big R, little y. This sperm fertilizes this egg. Okay, big R, big Y, little y. And if this sperm fertilizes this egg, you get big R, little y, little y. Now, I'm not going to do the rest because it's time consuming, but you go through the same process where you say, okay, if this sperm fertilizes this egg, this is going to be the outcome. And you do that to fill out the rest of the chart. If this sperm fertilizes this egg, here's the outcome down here. So these are our possible outcomes. What's found on the Punnett square here are the 16 possible outcomes of this F1 cross. Now we see they have different genotypes. Let's go through and figure out what the phenotype of these plants would be. And remember, we're looking at the gene for the shape of the pea, and then we're also looking at the gene for what color that pea will be. And yellow is dominant over green, and round is dominant over wrinkled. So in this case, we have big R, big Y, big Y. That means that this pea is going to be round and yellow because yellow is dominant and round is dominant. Okay, now in this case, big R, big Y, little y. Okay, we have a heterozygous situation here where there's one of each, but the dominant allele is going to win out and mask the recessive allele. So we're going to have a round yellow pea. How about here? Round and yellow. Same thing here. The dominant round allele is going to mask the recessive wrinkled allele, and the dominant yellow allele is going to mask the recessive green allele, and we will have a plant with round yellow peas. Okay, so we can go through. We see here this results in a plant with yellow peas as well. In the next scenario, we have big R, that's a plant with round peas, but look, there's 2 recessive alleles. So with little y, that means that this is going to be a round green pea plant. How about here? This is going to be round and yellow, and here, round and with 2 recessive alleles. Those both encode green, so we have a pea plant with round green peas. And we go through, let's see this one's going to be round and yellow. This is round and yellow. Now, here's our first situation where we have two recessive alleles for the R gene. We have a wrinkled and a wrinkled allele, and that means that this is going to be a plant with wrinkled peas, and those peas are going to be yellow. Here we have wrinkled yellow. Here we have round yellow, round and green, wrinkled and yellow, and then finally wrinkled and green. So with our F1 cross, when we started with these heterozygous parent plants, we see that there are 4 different possibilities in the outcome. We can have plants that have round yellow peas, plants that can have wrinkled yellow peas, plants that have round green peas, and plants that have wrinkled green peas. Now, altogether, we see there are 16 different possible outcomes here. And when we look, 9 of them are round and yellow, 3 are wrinkled yellow, 3 of the plants give round green peas, and only 1 of the 16 is going to give wrinkled green peas. So when you're doing a dihybrid cross and your pea generation has a homozygous dominant individual with both genes and a heterozygous individual for both genes, when those are crossed together, the F1 generation is all going to have the dominant phenotype for both genes. And in this case, both will have round yellow peas and round yellow peas. All the offspring will have round yellow peas. But if you take 2 of those F1 offspring and you mate them together to get the F2 generation, the magic ratio you get is 9:3 to 3:1. The one with 9 is going to have the dominant phenotype for both genes. And in this case, the dominant phenotype is round and yellow. So 9 of the 16 are going to have round yellow peas. Then you have 2 options where one of the phenotypes is the dominant and one is the recessive. So there are going to be 3 individuals that have wrinkled yellow peas. Wrinkled is the recessive phenotype and yellow is the dominant phenotype. And you're also going to have 3 other individuals that have round green peas, where round is the dominant phenotype and green is the recessive phenotype. Now, one of the 16 in the F2 generation is going to have both recessive phenotypes and have wrinkled green peas. Okay, so in that F2 generation, the magic number is 9:3 to 3:1. That's the magic ratio. So here, let me ask you a question. See if you can interpret the Punnett square we came up with. What is the likelihood of a plant with round green peas in the offspring of a cross of plants with RRYY and RRYY genotype? Now, this question sounds kind of complicated. This is the kind of question that you would get on an exam, and that's why I wanted to put it here, to take all this we're talking about and put it into a question that you might see. So let's look at the things we need to highlight in this question. Okay, now what are we looking for? We're looking for the likelihood of a plant with round green peas. Okay, so we're wondering about round green peas in the offspring. Okay, in the offspring of a cross of plants with certain genotypes. So plants with RRYY and RRYY, 2 heterozygous individuals, are crossed, and we want to know what's the likelihood of a plant with round green peas in the offspring. Okay, so now that we know what we're looking for, we see that's the exact scenario we have here. We did a cross of plants that are heterozygous for each gene, and we want to know what the likelihood of a plant is with the round green peas. Okay, we look here, we know there's 16, 1, 2, 3. There's 3 plants that will have round green peas statistically. And so 3 out of 16 is going to be the answer for this. Now, if you remember that magic ratio, 9:3 to 3:1, you can say, okay, round green peas, that's one of the 3s. So now when we look at this Punnett square, our 4x4 Punnett square gives 16 different outcomes, and it starts to get a little complicated, right? There's actually an easier way to figure out the answer to these. Let me show you this little trick. Okay, here is the easier way. What we do is we break up the 2 genes and we do 2 crosses, and then we just multiply the results together. if we're looking at two genes, one is the shape of the pea and one is the color of the pea, let's break those up into two smaller Punnett squares. Let's look first just at the round gene. Now, the father was heterozygous for both genes. So big R, little r, big Y, little y. We're going to break those apart and just look at big R, little r right now, okay? And the mother was big R, little r, big Y, little y. So we're going to separate these two genes as well and just look at the first one right now. So the father, big R, little r, mother, big R, little r, that's the cross we're going to do. And then we're going to do a cross with the other gene, big Y, little y, big Y, little y. Okay, so we've separated them. Instead of doing 4x4 Punnett squares that will give you 16 different outcomes, we're going to do 2x2 Punnett squares to give you 4 different outcomes. And so if you look at this cross, big R, little r, right? One from the father crossed with the mother. These are the possible outcomes. We can have big R, big R, little r, big R, and little r, little r. So if we just look at this gene and we do the cross for this gene, these are the possible outcomes. Now, when we go over here at big Y from father and big Y from mother, these are the 4 different outcomes. Big Y, little y, big Y, and little y, little y. Now remember, for these in the middle, they're heterozygous. They have one of each. It doesn't matter how you write it. I like to put the dominant one first, but the important thing is they have one of each. Okay, so now this is the question, right, that we did for that big Punnett square we just did. We can do the same thing, though. What is the likelihood of a plant with round green peas? Okay, well, let's look at the round part first. Over here, round. What is the probability of a plant with round peas in the offspring? Okay, big R is going to be round. Big R, little r is round because the round allele is dominant. Big R, little r then is round. Little r is recessive. That would be the wrinkled pea. So we have round, wrinkled. So the probability of having a pea plant that results in round peas is going to be 3 out of 4, right? Round, wrinkled. That means 3 out of 4 are going to be round. Now, our question said round green peas. Green or yellow is the other allele that we're looking at. So what's the possibility of having an offspring with green peas? Okay, now yellow's dominant, so big Y is going to be yellow. Big Y, little y is going to be yellow. Big Y, little y is going to be yellow. And little y, that's going to be green. So we have yellow, and green. Those are the possibilities for the color allele of these peas. Yellow, green. That means we're looking for green. That's 1 out of 4. It's going to be green. And now all we do is we multiply these two together. So 3/4 times 1/4. Well, 3 times 1 is 3. 4 times 4 is 16. So 3 out of 16, that's the probability. That's the likelihood of having a plant with round green peas in the offspring. Now, if you remember, that's exactly what we got when we did the Punnett square, right? 1, 2, 3 out of 16 have round green peas. So you can do out the Punnett square, which you've seen can be a little complicated, or you can just separate the genes and do smaller Punnett squares for each gene and then just multiply the probabilities together. Let's look at a different one then, okay? What is the likelihood of a plant with wrinkled green peas? Okay, now we figured out big R, little r. These are the potential offspring, and you can do a Punnett square to get these 4. What's the probability of a wrinkled offspring? Because we're looking for wrinkled and green peas in the offspring. Well, we have round, wrinkled. So that's 1 out of 4. Now we're looking for wrinkled green peas. Well, this is yellow, green. So as far as green peas, that's 1 out of 4. Here it is, 1 out of 4. So if the probability of wrinkled peas is 1 out of 4, and the probability of green peas is 1 out of 4, you multiply these together and you get 1 out of 16. So 1 out of 16 is the probability of getting a pea plant that has wrinkled green peas. And let's check the Punnett square again. We're looking for wrinkled green peas. Well, of all the options here, here's that 1 out of 16. In the 9 to 3 to 3 to 1 ratio, wrinkled green is the 1 because wrinkled and green are both recessive alleles. So 1 out of 16 is the probability in the offspring that a plant will have wrinkled green peas. Okay, so you can use this easier way to sort of double check your Punnett square if you want, or if you just need to find an answer on an exam or a test or a quiz, well, certainly this is a much faster way than doing out a 4x4 Punnett square. Now, the coolest thing about this easier way is that you don't have to just use 2 genes like we use here, right? You could actually use 3, you could use 4, you could do this with 25 different genes. As long as you break them up, gene by gene by gene by gene, you figure out what the probability is for each gene, and then you just multiply those probabilities together. And that will give you the probability, the final probability of having an offspring with all of the different traits that were given. I'll go through one of those more extensive examples in a different video, just for fun. Okay, so this is how you do a Punnett square and an easier way to figure out the offspring when you're doing a dihybrid cross. You're looking at 2 different genes being inherited. So I hope this was helpful for you today. And if it was, please subscribe to my channel. And that way YouTube's algorithms will be more likely to recommend this video to other people that are looking to learn about dihybrid crosses.